Hello, Lizzie here, and today I'm going to show you how to make Octavia, which is this gorgeous cushion. It's a bit of patchwork, bit of sashing, and some easy binding to hold the cushion together. An envelope back, so it's nice and easy for you. You can put a zip in if you want to. So this is the pattern that you'll get, and don't forget it's a download pattern on my website, lizzycurtis.com. So you get the full pattern with written and pictorial instructions. So if I just open up a page here, you'll see that it has full photos, full instructions. You've also got a design grid in this as well. So if I can find that and show you that. So it shows you how the cushion is put together, the light to dark, the dark to light shading, and what fabrics you need for those particular squares and half square triangles. But actually I do talk you all the way through it, and there shouldn't be any queries in your head at all. And if you've never done patchwork before, this is actually quite a nice easy start. It's a nice size block. You could take it up to the edge of the cushion here, and then you could repeat it and make a full size quilt with it if you wish, or just keep it as a little block to go into this lovely little cushion here. And it's actually quite a nice size as well. It's about 17-18 inches square, so it's a good size. So that's Octavia, so let's pop that through there. And I'm going to show you how to put it together. I'm going to do blues on mine, so it's a little bit different. Right, so the first thing you need to do, actually we need the pattern back. And the first thing you need to do is to take a look at the diagram that I just showed you of the dark to lights, light to darks. If that's how you want to do it, you don't have to do it that way. So if we have a look at this, I'll put it so you can see it on the overhead. What I do, and you'll see I've got ticks on mine where I've actually ticked that I've created those pieces. So you need to break it down, and it's a good thing to do this just one thing at a time. So for instance, I know that 5 is the white, and you'll see that 5 is repeated throughout, so I know that's the white. So in my first little bit I need a white square, 2.5 inch square, and then I need my darks, because 1 is the darkest of the colours, and half square triangle with the white. So I'm going to show you how to create that. And again, 1 is the dark colour, and again a repeat there. Now you will notice that there's only 3 half square triangles of the dark, so you will have a little square left over, but quite honestly you could always use that for another project. And then you're going to build up. So we're going to do this bit first, then we'll do the 2s, and then we'll do the 3s, and then we'll do the 4s, and that's how I have it on my table ready. So if I show you that, and it'll make a little bit of sense, I'll move that to the side. So remember I said to you I needed a white, so I've already cut out my white. This is the actual other corner here, so if I just point and show you, that's the other corner there. So now I want to create this little bit here, and obviously I'm using different fabrics. If you were to use all of the same colour, then this isn't going to be such an issue for you. But we need 1 dark, which is this one here, so I'm going to bring that over so you can see that's the 1 dark, and then I need to do these half square triangles. Well, I've got my fabrics ready, and I've already created some, but I'm going to show you how to create the half square triangles and made into a square, so I'm going to do that in a sec. But I've got all these pre-cut, and all I need to do is trim them down. Now, we need to get to a 2.5 inch square. And you'll notice this is enormous. This is actually a 3.5 inch square, and the mathematics when doing a half square triangle square like this is that it's actually, if I remember rightly, 3 3/8. Let's just make it 3.5 just for ease. All you have to do is remember to cut diagonally correctly to trim down your square. I'm going to do it so you know how it's done. It's absolutely so easy. So when you look at all my fabrics, I'm going to bring them all in. I've got these lined up exactly the same as in the pattern. So if I bring them in, you can see on the overhead. So there's my 1s, these are my 2s, these are my 3s, and these are my these are my 4s. So I've got them all in little piles next to me, so I know exactly where each shade is, and you can see they're going from dark, medium to light. But of course you could use, as I said, all 1 colour if you want to. So let's just pop all these out of the way so we're not confusing ourselves, and we'll just keep to this little section here first so we know what we're doing with the darks. So let's just move that out of the way as well. So what you need to cut, and it tells you in the pattern what you need to cut, 3.5 inch squares. And what we need is a white and a dark, and that's obviously right sides together. Pin them together like this, and let's just keep it there so you can see it on the overhead. So pin them together like that so they're not moving. But prior to that, you want to actually draw your lines. Very easy to do. I wouldn't do this with the pins in, but as I've got them in there now, I'll just leave them where they are. So you're just drawing diagonally from point to point. Just pop your ruler over the top and you're drawing down. Move your ruler over 1/4 inch and draw again. Flip this around and then go from the 1/4 inch from the middle out again and just draw your line. Now, if you have a 1/4 inch foot on your sewing machine, I would just stitch along there using your 1/4 inch foot, but you may not have. So it's good to actually draw that line. This is your stitch line. This is your cut line. This is your stitch line. Okay, all will become clear as we go along. Let me just pop my ruler down for a second. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stitch this line here all the way down, and this line here all the way down, and then we're going to cut down the centre of that. I'm leaving the pins in because that keeps everything nice and stable, keeps all my layers together, so don't want to lose anything. Bring in the sewing machine, and like I say, if you've got a 1/4 inch foot, great, just use that, you don't have to draw. But none of this is going to be seen, so if you haven't got a heat erasable pen, just use an ordinary pencil, something like that. Turn your fabric around and then come down the other side. So really what you've created is a 1/2 inch channel down the centre of that square. So if we look at it again, I'm not sure if you'll see it, but there's 2 lines of stitching here and here. And I'm going to take my pins out now because I don't need those anymore. And all I'm going to do is take my rotary cutter and my ruler, and I'm going to cut down that centre line there. So just get those points in line. There we go. Let's pop that to one side. So now we've got 2 half square triangles there, but actually they're doubled because we've stitched them. So you can see if I open them up, you've got a square. It's much bigger than you need, so don't worry. This isn't cut to size. As I said, you need to trim them down. And I've given you plenty of fabric to do that. So there's no, there's a little bit of waste, but not much. So just set those seams, pop your iron over that seam. And with this particular method, I want you to open up the seams, okay? It just helps. If you're going to quilt this, which we're not, but if you were going to quilt this, all your fabric is evenly distributed along the piece of patchwork. So you're opening up your seams and just pressing those open nice and flat. If I can get my finger in there. Now we know from looking at the diagram, one of these is going to waste. It won't go to waste, it will just go into my box of part finished things that I can pick up from time to time and think, oh, I must do something with that. So those are nicely pressed. So the next thing we need to do is to trim one of these down. Well, I'll get rid of one because I don't need it. So we know we need 3. When we look at this diagram again, so let me bring that in so we're very clear on what we're doing. If you look at what I've already got here, let's get this right in the middle so you can see. We're looking at the dark fabrics here, so that's 1, 1, 1, 1, and 5 is the white. We've already seen the white, the number 5, that's that one there. Let's make sure we've got it right side up. And we've got the square there, the dark square there, but then we need 1, 2, 3 squares made up of half square triangles, and it's going to go something like that. But obviously we need to trim this down. But we need to make sure that our ruler, this is the only complicated bit of the whole thing, so don't panic. Just watch this over a couple of times if you're not sure. So on your ruler, you should have, one of these, should have a line going all the way through, and you could use that as your guide if you want to, but you're going to cut a 2.5 inch square, and it needs to be trim, and it needs to be that line, that seam line, is kept central, and when you do cut, the point is right on the seam line. So all I'm going to do is line my piece up here. I'm going to just sort of eyeball it. It's easier if you stand up, I must admit. And you could look at it so the points of your squares on your grid goes all the way through. Now I know easily that I've got plenty of fabric there, so I'm just going to eyeball this, like I say. Try and get this in line. There we go. And just keep trimming it until you're happy. So let's do one edge like that. Let's give ourselves a start. And then you need to line up this bottom line here to make sure that it's still central and still parallel. So there's my squares going through the centre of that line, which is absolutely perfect. And just keep trimming it back. And again, just line that up. And this time I'm going to line it up so I've got the 2.5 inch line here. So this is 1 inch, 2 inch, 1/2 inch, and I can make sure that my square, the kiss if you like of my square, goes through that diagonal line. That's the most important thing. So just turn it again, and this time we'll cut that right down to a 2.5 inch square. So we'll get that all lined up, and like I say, just make sure that your crosses of your squares go through that diagonal seam. In fact, I'll just move that over a bit because I'm going to cut the other side. There we go. We'll turn that around now. And 2.5. Absolutely perfect. So just do a little bit at a time. Take your time. Think about what you want to achieve. So what we've done here is we've cut it down, we've trimmed it down, and we've got the points absolutely perfect in that square. So we've got the perfect 2.5 inch square now, and we can fit that into our puzzle. So when we bring back our pieces, bring those in, we'll marry those up. So if we look at this one here, that goes into, let's get it right, that goes into that corner like that. And then we just need to repeat with all of the other squares that we've made up, all of these part squares using half square triangles. So I'll go away and trim those back, and then I'll come back to you and show you how it's laid out. So I have trimmed all my squares back to 2.5 inch squares. So now we need to, I'm going to place them on my my wool ironing mat here, because I want them to stay in place. If I left them on my mat, I'd have to move them to stitch. So I put them on here ready for stitching, and they kind of stick to it, a bit like a fuzzy felt board. So when we look at the diagram again, we just need to lay our pieces out to follow that. So if you look at it here, let's just start from the beginning again. So number 5 is white, so I'll put that down here. And then I need half square triangle with dark. I need a dark, and these can overlap on your mat if you don't have enough room. Another half square triangle square with dark, and then one across the other side. So you can see that's my 1, 2, 3, 4 squares using number 1 dark. Now we need the medium. Well, medium is here. I've kept them all in the right position so I know and I don't forget which is medium. So I need 2 squares like that. I need a square down here, and then I need let's have a look, one up here. So I've got a spare one, which is that one there. So I'll just put that to one side. And then I'm going in with my medium colour, which is number 3. So we'll start off with a half square triangle square. So let's put that one there. And then 3 again is that square there, which is there. It's just like a jigsaw puzzle really. And then another half square triangle square there, which is this one. And don't forget, we've got a white one to go there. So let's pop that there. Make sure we've got right side up. I've used some lovely broderie anglais for this. And then the last colour is the light colour, which is number 4. So we need a light square there. And then we need a white with half square triangles made up of, and then the same here. So that is actually our little sort of block, and then from there it's just adding the sashing, which it doesn't take 5 minutes at all. So by keeping it on the woolen mat, and if I turn that around to show you, it'll just stay there. Do you see? That looks really nice from a distance, really nice. So obviously now we're going to stitch these together, but what we need to do is stitch them in pairs. Now if you want to actually chain piece these together, please do that. I tend not to, that's just what I do, but you decide what you want to do. So I'm going to stitch these two together at the top, then these two, again, until I've paired them all up. And once I've done that, I'm going to stitch these two pairs together, those two together, those two together, and those two together. But as I do each stage, I'll show you what it looks like. So I like to keep them on my mat because everything stays in place. So if I just bring the machine in. So the first two blocks, you're picking up right sides together and just marrying up those lines as best you can, the seams. Don't forget we've opened the seams up and we've actually given them a good iron, a nice dry iron. Don't steam them at this stage. And then little back stitch to start, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to do another little back stitch just to make sure they don't come apart, and I will just chain piece this row. Again, match those seams up, match the corners up, and put them right sides together as they sit on your mat. Don't move them. And if you've got half an hour spared, you're making this, maybe you're making something else, and you just want to piece these together, then do that in these kind of stages. And put them back. Put them back. They'll need an iron. And we're opening up these seams again, as we did before. So that this row is all squares, nice and easy. Again, 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'll just do a little back tack. I didn't before, but I should have done. In my world, I should have done. And just bring these pieces together. And just make sure those edges are absolutely. This is the only thing about patchwork, is it does need to be a little bit accurate. So just watch your seam allowance, just you know, keep an eye on all of that. Keep an eye also on these squares. When you put them back down, make sure you put them in the order that you pick them up. Make sure those darks stay in the right place, and check it from time to time. Just check with the guide that I've done for you, the diagram. If you're using just one colour, then it's no problem, is it? You're not going to worry. So just bring these two together, and it's just being methodical really. Again, just those seams look just so lovely and crisp, ironed flat and open. It lessens the bulk on each of those seams. So as we pick them up, make sure you put them down in the right place. That's why I always keep them on my mat. It is like building a jigsaw puzzle. That's all it is. Let's just make sure we got the broderie anglais the right way around. It's so pretty. I've been saving it for a special occasion, and you know what? Sometimes we just don't get those special occasions, do we? And it's not hugely expensive, but I just love it so much. So this time I thought, you know what, I'm going to use it. So perhaps it's a special occasion now. It doesn't lie flat like normal fabric. It's a bit bobbly and right. So there's all our pieces, our pairs. So we're going to press those. I'm a bit insistent on pressing when it comes to things like this. I'll turn that around to show you, and it's starting to shrink a little bit now. So you can see they're all in pairs. So if I move that, you'll be able to see that they're all in pairs. So I'm actually going to iron all those seams open, and I'll come back to you when I've done that, and then we'll stitch those two pairs together, and then we'll stitch the 4 rows together. Right, I've ironed all my seams open, so they look lovely and crispy now, and if I turn them over, you'll see that they're all ironed open, nice and flat. So just make sure you keep everything in line, don't move anything. I'm going to turn it round so it looks at me, right way round. So now you're putting the 2 pairs together, and again, same thing applies, just be careful to get those seams lined up, the diagonal seams lined up as best you can. and we'll do a little bit of a chain stitch, although I've just cut my threads, but you could just chain stitch these together, chain piece them together I should say. Might as well cut them now. Now we've started, we might as well. So I'm just feeding them under the machine, 1/4 inch seam allowance, until we've done all 4 rows. And just wriggle that until those points are absolutely perfect. Line them all up beautifully. Right, so I've got my pairs back. Look, and they're all muddled up. We'll see how we get on. But I think I've got more of a clearer picture now of what it looks like. And of course I've got my diagram still. I've got my diagram still out, it's here. And I'm following that. Don't be a hero. Follow the pattern. Right. So that's the 4 rows. It's getting smaller and smaller. That's the 4 rows now joined together. Or, you know, you've got 4 rows complete. So I'm just going to press those middle seams there, and then we're just going to join all those together. So I'm going to join that one to that one and that one to that one. Okay. But we'll just get those seams open. Now you could you know, iron those, just sort of set the seam if you like, setting the stitches into the fabric, and that's just a case of, let me just flip this back, and that's just a case of putting that seam flat, giving it a press, and then opening that seam up. And I think I've turned that around, in fact I know I have. And then just get your fingernail or something in there just to open that seam up and split it open, press it nicely, flip it over, press it again. I always think patchwork is a little bit like dressmaking, where you really do need to iron everything. I think I'll flip that over again, so just be aware. It's be so easy at this stage to get one row wrong. That goes that way. You do get to see the shape of the heart, so it gives you some guidance. If the heart doesn't look like a heart, somewhere or another you might have gone wrong. But if you keep following the diagram, you know, I don't do anything without following that. Have it within eye distance, if you like. There we go. So there's all my pieces pressed. So I'm just going to join those rows together. Again, I'm going to turn it so it faces me. So right sides together, and just nest that middle seam. Well, you're not nesting it, but you're just making sure that middle seam is pretty okay. And then just pop it under the needle. The thing is, we haven't done a huge amount of patchwork, so there's not much that could go wrong. We'll see. And what you could do, of course, is to pop a pin in those seams and match those seams up back and front. But we'll just go for it. I'm not entering this into the Houston Quilt Show. This is going to go on my sofa. There we go. So that's the first row completed. And obviously that will need a press as well. So that's the first 2 rows. Let's put it down, have a look at it. If you need any adjustments, do them now. So now I'm flipping over the 3rd row onto the 2nd row, or 2nd row onto the 3rd row, whichever way you look at it. Making sure you've got everything in the correct position. Again, consult your diagram if you need to. If you're doing the dark to light, you might not. But it's a nice, easy patchwork piece, and if you've never done patchwork before, give it a go. You've got nothing to lose. So just get that all lined up. Just take your time. So that's our 3rd row. Again, we'll have to give it a press. So it's coming along. So put it back down, flip that one over, so we know it's all in the right place. Get those edges lined up. We know we've cut those squares accurately. So trust yourself that it's all going to line up. Just make sure those seams are lying nice and flat. And you could use like a stiletto to hold the seams down and just to keep it under control a little bit. But they're not doing too badly on their own. There. Okay, so that's our heart made. Give it a little squidge. I'm going to iron it now. Not 100%, but it'll be fine. So there we are. So there what it is. That's what it looks like. You can see, following the pattern, we've got the dark, medium dark, medium and light. But again, like I said, that's up to you. So I'll just give this a little iron and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've pressed it all. Well, I've given it an iron. It looks a lot better now. So I'm just going to kind of trim it up a bit. You don't want to take a lot off. You literally just want to square up your sides. So it's just a case of, these fabrics move. It doesn't matter how good you are. They always move a smidge. So we're just taking off the smallest amount just to square it up a bit, because we're going to put our sashings on now, which are super straight. So I'm not sure if I wanted to cut all that off, but we did. We have. It's done. And don't miss this bit out, because it really does, it can make a difference to how your finished block will look at the end. So I'm going to just take that little slither off in the centre, and on this bit here, just, it's the smallest amount, probably 1 or 2 millimetres if that, because they're the really tiny blocks to start off with. So let's pop those in the bin. Okay, so now we've got our heart beautifully trimmed. We're going to put the sashing on. Now the sashing is all pre-measured for you. It's just getting it in the right order. I want you to have a look again, if we can look at the overhead, and it's quite clear how this is done. Now I've started my sashing off on the sides, but you could start off top and bottom. That's up to you, but we'll stick to what the pattern says. So we're going to put these 2 side pieces on first, and then we're going to put the 2 end pieces, top and bottom pieces on. So it's just a case of getting the right pieces on your stash here ready. So let's get those. Should have them all in order, we'll see. So it's right sides together, so I'll do the sides. I'm just checking this fabric because, like I said, it's broderie anglais. Now I've cut all of mine a good inch bigger, and the reason for that is I could give you, well, I think I have given you exact measurements, pretty sure I have, but it depends on your seam allowances and how generous you've been with your seam allowances as to whether that is going to be the finished block size. You know, if we were all professional quilters, it would definitely be the correct size, but it may not be for you. So in the actual pattern, I've said to you what the sizes should be, but also the advice of cutting them just a wee bit longer, 1/2 inch or 1 inch, just to allow, because you don't want to cut them to exact size and then be disappointed that they don't quite fit. So, you know, if a professional quilter was listening to me, or patchworker was listening to me, they would be horrified, because they like everything to be super accurate. But, you know, we're human, I think, and sometimes we can make mistakes. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep my ironing mat on here, because I'm going to just iron this as I go, because I'm just going to flip those seams out. Now I'm not going to open these seams up this time. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to flip them over. They say press to the dark side, but I kind of press the seams out away from the block, and do that as you go along, because it keeps it nice and neat. You also will want to trim these pieces. Now, ideally, you're going to use your rotary cutter and your mat and your ruler, but I haven't got enough room here, so I'm going to eyeball these with my scissors. We'll see. I have got a bin there, by the way. But use your rotary cutter and mat and everything, because it will make it easier for you. And you can square them up. So I'm just going to use the edge of my existing block to make sure I've got those on straight and I've cut correctly. And I can always trim. So a quick mention about my Gold Club. If you haven't joined already, there's no time like the present. Just pop to my website, find the link that says Gold Members Sign Up here, and then you have access to my Facebook weekly events, which is absolutely amazing. My girls love it. And of course you get the free patterns as well. So if you want more information, there is actually a video on YouTube that you can have a little look at. But we might as well use the edge of the block as our straight line. Try and look out for those seams underneath that are open, that are pressed open, to keep them open, but at the sides the actual seams are going to be facing out. So now we're doing the top and bottom, so there's one piece done. Again, I'll just give it a little iron. Just keep ironing as you go. This does make a difference. And I might just do this round and then get my rotary cutter on it and give it a nice cut. Make sure my iron is on. There we go. So flip that around. And this is a nice easy way of doing sashing where we haven't done a 45-degree angle. We've literally just done well, a bit like log cabin in a way, where you're just going round and round. And it does make it nice and neat, and it's very, very easy. And we're actually going to do the binding in the same way, really easy and quick. Once you've got that initial heart block done, you'll find this comes together really quickly. So let's give that an iron again. Press away from you. That opens up that seam. There we go. Super. It's looking lovely. Again, just keep ironing as you go. Just make sure that it's lying beautifully. Just turn that down for a second. So let's just get rid of the ironing mat, get our ruler in, and we'll just square off these edges. Like I say, I've trimmed this. I've added on fabric just to make sure that it fits my square. And again, let's just trim that up. So this is what you'll do on every round. Just make sure it's all trimmed and all lovely and neat. So there's the first round done. There we go. Can you see? Looks nice now, doesn't it? So the next round is the actual dark sashing. So it's just 1 inch pieces of sashing. Again, they're all in order. Better not disturb them. So the first 2 are going on the sides. So we're going to keep repeating that process. And again, 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, I've cut these too big deliberately. So I'll just overhang those a little bit. And like I said to you, it's just your insurance policy, and it's hardly wasteful of fabric, so don't worry about that. Now this is where I think your 1/4 inch seam allowance is quite important to be accurate, because the sashing is literally 1 inch wide. It's just to frame the piece, it's just to bring it all together. I think if it was all white, it would be too stark. And of course we've got the blue, a darker blue, going around the outside of the cushion as binding. So again, we'll bring the mat in, turn the iron up a little bit, and I'll just push those seams away from me, and that should work a treat. Beautiful fabric, really gorgeous fabric. And so we're going to do the opposite side now. So we're doing the sides, we're not doing the top and bottom, we're doing the sides. So again, line that up, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Oh, cut my threads. Let's just go back on that. Some of these machines have gadgets which are brilliant, as long as you get your foot in the right place. But the thing I love about this machine is that it cuts my threads, so I don't end up with a desk full of threads like we've had on other projects. So again, give it a good iron. You're pushing away so that seam, that sashing folds over really nicely. There we go, super. And then I'm just, because it's only a small bit of sashing, I'm just going to eyeball that and just cut that away. But please use your rotary cutter and mat and ruler, that's what they're for. But just to save me a little bit of time showing you how to do this, I'll just use my scissors. Okay, so there's the sides done. Okay, it looks nice now, doesn't it? So we're going to do top and bottom. So again, just line them up, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm lining my strip, my sashing strip, against the white, which I know is perfectly cut. Again, just going along. Just watch your seams. And of course this is right sides together, in case you needed that reminder. And then push those seams out. It's worth doing this every time. And do what I do if you can, and that's have everything handy so you don't have to keep getting up and down. Just a little ironing mat like this is perfect, isn't it? So again, just line that up on the white. And then just come all the way down. Just be aware of your seam allowances. I know I keep saying that, but this is what will make the difference. Okay. So we'll just do this last one. Okay. See how it's growing? It is a bit, in some ways it is a bit like log cabin, isn't it? Because that grows. I like how a log cabin quilt grows. There we go. That's lovely. So I'll just trim this off. In fact, I'm going to do my rotary cutter. So let me just explain what I'm going to do, and then I'll go ahead and do it. So this is how we got to so far. Got the thin sashing going around. If you look at the cushion behind me, there we go, the red one. So it's just that red sashing that we've done there. So we need to do another round of white, and then we can put the whole cushion together and bind it. So we're a good 3/4 of the way done. So I'm going to trim my ends with my rotary cutter, my mat and my ruler so they're accurate. And I'm going to put the white sashing on and get it ready to put the cushion together. So I'll come back to you in a sec when I've done that. So now I have completed the whole square, so the whole block if you like. There we go. Looks quite nice, doesn't it, with the blue and white? Nice and fresh. So now we need to create it into a cushion, but this cushion is bound all the way around rather than stitched together and then trimmed in some ways. It's all done via the binding, so the whole thing is held together with that. So we need 2 pieces for the envelope back, and the measurements are in the pattern, so there's no guesswork here. But we need to, when we put the back on, we need to put them right sides out. So the front is right side out, the back is right side out. And then I'm going to stay stitch all of those layers together. But the art of this is to get the pinning, so get this absolutely perfect. So on one of the long edges, you want to turn under 1/4 inch, turn under 1/4 inch again and stitch. So we'll do that on the second piece that I've got here. And I've got the most gorgeous Egyptian cotton, which is just too delicious for words. And I've starched it. Can you imagine? It's just delicious. So just going along that seam there, because this is going to be your neatening edge for the envelope back. So turn over 1/4 inch. You know what, don't measure it. But obviously it wants to be a small little seam, otherwise you won't have a big enough, or it won't overlap at the back big enough. so it sits nice. Now the pieces in the measurements, just a bit like the sashing, they're going to be a little bit bigger than what you want, and I always do it like that. Kind of put money on that I always do it, that it's bigger, and then I stay stitch it all together and then I trim back. So I'm going to put my cushion front right side down on my desk, showing the workings. Looks quite neat. And on the back I'm doing this so that these pieces are right side up. Okay, so my seams, the folded part is right side down, wrong sides together. Just keep thinking wrong sides together. And all of these pieces will overlap. It's deliberate. But you want to make sure that when the centre pieces cross over, that you want at least, well, 2 or 3 inches of flap over. So just be aware of that. So I'm just going to put these down on my desk, and if we look on the overhead there, we can actually see, if I move that pattern, we can see how that looks. And you just want to make sure that that is pretty central, and you can, funnily enough, you can see through the fabric quite well. But you can also see how the cushion backs are bigger. It's meant to be, because I never ever think cut accurately, it'll fit. It won't, because think of all those seams that we've done in that patchwork piece, and the chances are it will not fit. You'll struggle. So I've made it deliberately bigger. Actually, what I'm going to do is flip this over. So where these 2 pieces fold over, they kind of, you've got that flap there. Pin those and pin them back a little bit, because those pins can stay there for a while. Because I do not machine over pins, but it's holding those 2 layers together quite well. And then I'm going to flip this whole thing over like that. So you can see my pins sticking in there, and you can see how big that is in comparison to the cushion front that we made. So now I'm going to put my pins in. Okay, now you may need to move this as you go along, as you start stitching, but I really want you to pin this well, because you're going to stay stitch all these layers together. Stay stitching, top stitching, call it what you like. You're going to be combining these 2 fabrics together to make one piece. And that's far easier than 2 raw edges fighting with your binding as you're putting it on. It's just easier. So we're going to stitch on the right side of the cushion about 1/8 of an inch, because our binding is going to be about 1/4 of an inch. And then you're going to trim back. So you can use your ruler and your rotary cutter, your ruler and your mat to trim this back once you've stay stitched it. But like I say, I'm pinning it, but you might find that you need to move the pins as you go. Use a walking foot if you like, because all the layers then stay put. So it's worth the effort of doing all that pinning. So that's kept it all together. So there's the front. You can see what that looks like, and then you can see what the back looks like. So I'm just going to pop it under the machine and stay stitch it just 1/8 of an inch all the way around, joining those 2 layers together. So look, I'll do that and I'll come back to you in a sec. So there we are. So I've stay stitched all the way around, joined the cushion back to the cushion front, right sides out. So don't forget that. So you need that lovely neat envelope opening at the back. So that is kind of like a completed cushion that's joined together, but we need to bind it. I've trimmed it back as well. So if you remember from the last couple of minutes ago, we had the cushion back was too big, but I've stitched it, I've trimmed it down so it's beautifully square now. So now we need to put the binding on. Now we do this almost the same as we did the sashing. So with your binding, it's obviously your regular kind of more sort of commonly used 2.5 inch wide strip, which I've folded in half and I've pressed. Okay, so you've got 2 of those for the sides and 2 of those for the top and bottom. We put our sides on first, and then we put the top and bottom on, and then we fold over. It's actually a really nice, neat way of doing your binding. So again, these are bigger, and that's intentional this time, because we need to make sure they fold over correctly and that we can lay the next strip of binding on it as well, so it's nice and square. And I think the photographs are particularly good in the pattern that shows that. So 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, little back stitch to start. And you're going 1/4 of an inch all the way up the sides of your cushion. So we're kind of following everything that we've done so far by starting with the sides. You could of course start with the top and bottom. There's nothing to say that what I've done is how you would want it. So again, just lining everything up. And go from the front, so we're going on the right side. Nice neat finish. So there's one. I'll iron it in a second because again it needs to be ironed. So now we're putting the other side on, opposite side. Done this one, going to do that one. So let's just get that together at the top there, nice and neatly. I'm really loving the blue, but I know I always do like blue and white. So just down these seams. It ends up quite a large cushion, really. It's from a small, humble beginning. Seems like a long time ago that we made the heart now. So I'm just going to switch my iron on. Bring up my little mat. You might want a bigger mat now, but this is good for the worktop here. And then we're just going to iron over just like we did before. Just going to push those seams away from me. So this is the folded edge here of your binding, which eventually would be flipped over to the back of the cushion. And you can see that I've kept the theme going by using a darker binding on the outside. I think it kind of frames the whole piece, really. And by all means, repeat this. Don't make it into a cushion, make it into a quilt or a table runner or a wall hanging. 3 hearts in a row would be absolutely super. So there we are. So there's our binding pushed over. I'm going to keep that iron on for just a second. So there's our our binding either side. And you can see it extends, that's fine. We ignore that for the moment. But what we're going to do is going to put our other pieces on top and bottom. They are slightly different sizes because we've obviously added to the dimensions here. And if I show you this end, so it's raw edges against raw edges, and they go straight across the top there like that. Can you see how that looks? So if I hold that up, yeah, it looks great. And actually, like I said, the photographs in the pattern is absolutely super because it shows it just like that. So we're going to stitch right across. So we're going to stitch right across our binding that we just ironed over, okay? So don't keep your binding flat to the front of the cushion. As you stitched it, you want to fold it back, and that's what we're stitching over. And like I say, there's plenty of I've been generous with the measurements here because we want to make sure that I'd rather trim back than have to cut another piece of fabric. So again, 1/4 inch all the way down, and then once we've finished this little bit, we just trim those extra pieces off and fold our binding back. It's really a lovely, easy process. It makes the most perfect squared off corners. If you're not very confident, let's say, with your 45-degree angles, not everybody can do that perfectly, I can assure you, then do it this way. Nobody's going to tell you off. Certainly not me. So we've done one side, and I'll iron that back in just a second. Now we're doing the other side. And you end up with this sort of crisscross design. And just make sure that those seams that you've stitched just before are going out, are facing out of the cushion, not in. Because when you come to stitch the binding, you don't want to see that seam at all. And if, when you've stitched this, and I may well have done, if one of those seams is facing in, it's worth just unpicking that little piece and restitching it. So just come up to the end here and straight over your binding and a little back stitch. Okay, so I'm going to press that because it needs to be pressed opened nice and flat, and then we'll trim those little ends away. What I'll do is I'll show you that overhead, so it's quite clear what you're trimming. And be careful when you're trimming, because you're trimming fabric that's very near folds, and we don't want to cut the folds. You see, it's quite a big piece now. So just press those nicely. And press those seams away from you. There we go. Right. It's looking gorgeous. Super. Okay. So let's get rid of all of this. Now ideally you're going to use your rotary cutter and your ruler again. Oh, I've got another ruler here that I prefer to use. Here we go. Like I say, be very careful because you're right near folds. Please don't cut your folds. So I'm just going to use my ruler to offer up. Be careful of those folds. I mean, I would say cut 1 millimetre away just to make sure. And we're just trimming back. So if I show you on the overhead there, I've just cut that one away, but I'm going to flip that back for the moment and just trim that away. So that's what you want to end up with. So there's your folded edge of your binding. There's the folded edge of your binding here. So if I just flip that around just so you can see this again. So this is how it looks when it's been pressed and you've got all these sort of ends going on. So that one can come off. So I need to do it so it's comfortable for me. And then push that back and just make sure that's lovely and square. Do not cut anywhere near here because that's where your fold is of your binding. So I'm just pushing my ruler out just a smidge and just cutting that little piece there. And we'll just work our way around the whole piece like that. I mean, you can trim that first section if you want, but I just find it just as convenient to do it now. Like I say, just move it away from the fold and cut. Trim it all back. One more to do. Let's cut this one. And let's cut this last one. There we go. Good. So that's all trimmed beautifully now. So now it's just a case of folding the binding back, but there is a bit of a technique to this, as you might expect. So you're looking at the sides first. Do you remember we did the sides first? So those are the ones you're going to turn over first. So if we go on the overhead, you'll be able to see that these are my sides, obviously. And if I just flip this, so it's easier for me to show you. So what you're going to do, and it's quite clear in the instructions, these are the sides, okay? And, oh, let's just trim that thread. And you're folding those over first, okay? So we'll just get a few clips in and we'll do a little bit. And just sort of hold those with a clip. And you could give this a press if you want. I mean, personally, I would hand stitch this without a shadow of a doubt. Some people will run it under the machine. You know what, I do love to sit and do this hand stitching. So that's the first one we're going to do. And now we're going to do the opposite side. So twiddle it around and just do the opposite sides and put a pin in or clip, whatever is comfortable for you. And like I say, if you want to iron this over, please iron it over. And what happens now is that because we've folded this in this order, so the sides go in first, when we do top and bottom, when we fold those in, it's automatically got an incredibly neat edge. So if we look at it here on the overhead, it's perhaps a little hard to see on the dark mat. But look, there's the raw edge of where we cut before. So that gets tucked in, this gets brought over, and you get not only the perfect squared off corner, but there are no raw edges or anything to worry about. Everything is contained. It's the easiest way to do binding if you're not clever with your 45 degrees. And like I say, not everybody is. So again, with this one, you're just folding that back. You can make a little sort of angle with that, so it's sort of that raw edge sits in, and just get hold of it and push it back, fold it over. And I'll just pop a clip in there to hold it, and then the same again, so a couple of more little clips, Fold that raw edge in, fold it over, and you've got the perfect corner. And just a couple of more clips and it's done. And then it's just a case of hand stitching, and I will take that away and do that myself off camera. You don't want to sit and watch me hand stitch for an hour. There we go. So that's it done, and that's all there is to it. And that you can see that binding is on there beautifully. If we turn it around and hold it up, can you see? Look, that looks really lovely, doesn't it? I wonder what it looks like with a cushion in. Shall we put a cushion pad in just to see? Like I say, I know I need to hand stitch this. Some people obviously would put it under the machine. So, because we've bound this, because it's all been stitched twice with the stay stitching and putting the binding in as well, it's quite strong. So it'll take you pushing this pad in. It's a little bit weird with the clips around, but I'm sure you can forgive me. So just pop it in and try and get a pad that's slightly a bit bigger. So get a nice 18-inch pad and just take your time with popping it in there. I'd normally be stood up doing this. Get those corners in. Get those in and then fold your envelope back over. And if it was stitched, you could just give it a little squidge and sort of pat it about to get it so it's sitting nice. There we are. Oh, okay. Let's just turn it around. Ah, looks lovely, doesn't it? Obviously I need to do my binding. You can forgive me for that, but I'm going to hand stitch it to make it a really nice finish. And that looks amazing. I'll show you a picture of it when it's fully completed. But look at the difference between the blue and the red. Yeah, I love it. Okay, so this is Octavia, and it's a really simple piece of patchwork. You could do your shading or you could just use one colour. It's entirely up to you. But whatever you do, I hope you make loads.